Alright, g'day guys, and welcome back tonight to another Obsidian video. Tonight we're going to be looking at some advanced data entry techniques. I've basically been spending the last probably couple of weeks just doing data entry into the tool and really sort of learning how it works and playing with some data and just seeing how I feel and if I can find more efficient ways to do what I'm doing. And I have to admit, I've been blown away with how easy it is to work with this tool. The fact that it's just folders and files, and those files are just effectively text files, it just opens up so many possibilities. Now, outside of the gaming world, I work in a data analytics space, so I've got access to pretty advanced tools for working with big data. One of the primary tools that we use is a tool called Ultrix, which for anyone in the data space would probably have heard of. It's basically graphical programming. Instead of writing SQL code, you're just dragging nodes around on the screen and manipulating how the data is being worked, and you're just basically ETLing it into a usable format, but you're doing it without having to write textual code. You're just sort of doing it on the screen with graphical nodes. It's a lot easier, I'm not going to lie. I really quite enjoy doing it. It's like little puzzles for me to solve every time I try to do something. Anyway, Ultrix is about $7,000 a license. So for the average roleplay gamer, you're not going to be able to afford a license. Like, I don't know about you guys, but my wife would probably chop my head off and just go and find a new husband if I was spending that sort of much money on a single application just for my gaming. So obviously I have access to it through work, and I have got my hands on my own license as a result of a career change that I've been doing, but it's just not accessible to most people. So what I wanted to do was just have a look around and see if there's any other options out there, and fantastically there's a tool called KNIME, which is basically a free open source version that does pretty much exactly the same thing. It allows you to do graphical data manipulation without having to code, and that basically means that if you've got a basic understanding of data and how data flows, and basic understanding of programming, such as what a variable is and what type of variable types there are, so whether something's like a string or an integer, for example, then this sort of tool can really enable you to do some fantastic things. So anyway, I'm not making this video for everyone. I'm literally making this so that you guys can see what it is that I'm doing. I'm going to share a workflow with you so you can have access to it, and it might just open up some ways of thinking for some of you. It might give you the opportunity to jump in here and create your own workflows. Who knows? So just sharing so you can get some insight into how it is that I work. Alright, so let's jump over. What I'm doing tonight is I've been looking at this fantastic module here, Sly Forish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. I've heard lots of people talk about it, and I've picked up my own copy. And what I've found, obviously, is that this is a really nice PDF. That's where I've got it. I've got it in PDF form. But there's quite a few tables in here. So, for example, these. Now, the problem with these tables, if you try and copy them into Obsidian, we're going to do a new note. Alright, they come in this way that's really not that useful. Alright, it's no good. To convert this to a table now, you kind of have to go through and add in all your lines individually, which is just a pain, right? So you'd have to come through, you'd have to get rid of all your spaces, right? You'd be here for a while, but that is the way you can do it. I'm not the sort of person that will sit here and do a really annoying repeatable task over and over again if I know there's a more efficient way. And with the tools I've got available to me, I know there is a more efficient way. So what I did was set about creating a repeatable process that I could use to make myself more efficient. So the first thing that I did is I did a bit of a Google for a PDF to Markdown converter. So found this fantastic file here. I will grab this. I'll drag my PDF in here that I've downloaded from dmsguild.com. Doesn't look like it's going to work this time. We'll just reset it. Doesn't look like it's working this time either. Really doesn't want to go. Let's try it this way. Where am I? Downloads. Oh, it's because I'm in a zip file. That would help. One sec. There we go. Make sure your data is not in a zip file before you do this. Alright, so you can see that that's basically just taken that entire PDF and stripped it out. If you go into this edit mode, you can see that basically it's already formatted this. So what I did was I did a Control A to select all, a Control C to copy that, and then I came over here into a new note and I pasted this all in. What we're going to do, I'll go into a demo vault here. Do this in here. Alright, so let's go in, we'll paste a new note. Not like that. Copy. Paste. So now we've got the whole PDF in here. Alright, and you can see it's gone through and it's added various markdown elements as well. Oh, this has got that new live preview. Turn that off. Alright, so now we can see here we've got the formatting in here that's already there, but what we have, if we scroll down, is we'll find the tables in here exist, but not in a usable form. So for example, here's a prime example. It's added in the code snippets to say that this is code, but it's still not usable. So I wanted to take the text from this format and turn it into something. I will say this before we proceed, is I do have to fix up the table in this way before this works. So I have to make sure that none of the break lines are entered there, and I could probably find a way to remove that if I tried hard enough, but that doesn't take me long at all. If I do this one, for example, I just come down, get rid of the enters, press delete. Careful you don't get rid of the bad ones. There we go. Alright, so that's just the cleaned up data. But again, that's still in one large stack of text. So I'll copy that while I'm here. And I'll show you how this works before I walk you through what it's doing. But basically, I've come in here and I've got a table creator for table name and a table creator for paste table data. So what I do is I right click on this node and go configure. I select the top cell here and I paste. You can see that that's actually not got enough data in here, so I've just selected everything and pressed delete to clear up my previous table and now paste, and now it's, you know, it's only coming up to row 10. Alright, now I just need to grab that that name of the thing. So what is it? It's an effect. This is, I think this is short-term madness. It's helpful to have the PDF open when you're going through and doing these things. I think I just missed that. Here we go. So short-term madness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my KNIME program. I'm going to configure this top node. I'm going to go short-term madness is my table name. Alright, you can see in here, I'll expand that so you can see it. And then in here what I've done is I've just put the folder where I want to save these. Now, in this case here, what I actually want to do is save this into the folder with the Obsidian that I'm working with. So if I come in here, we're working in the demo vault. So I'm going to create a new folder in my demo vault called random tables. Alright, and I'm just going to copy that address as text by right clicking up here and going copy address as text. And then I'm going to come in here, delete this one and paste this one. And that's my save to folder. Now it is important that you put this little dash at the end here. I've made it so that's a requirement. Anyway, now we can click go. Alright, done. That's how long it took. Alright, if we go back to Obsidian and we go to random tables, we now have short-term madness. Now I just need to make sure that I've got the dice roller plugin installed on here. I do not. So I'll install the dice roller. I'll enable it. And now when we come back here, we may need to reset this. Oh, there we go. Now we've got the dice roller enabled. Now we've got our table. We can see got the header and we can roll for the results. So what's basically happened is you can see this section of text here. It's created this and it's got the dice roller up the top. It's basically embedded the name of the file in here, and I'm obviously dynamically creating that name. I'm referencing the table name, which I'm dynamically adding into here, so that's all the same as well. And it's effectively splitting the data up into a table and formatting it in the table format, which means once you come into Obsidian, it's all there and off you go, so really quick. So let's jump over into here and just walk you through this, because you know there's a fair bit going on. So we'll start here with the enter table name. We're right click and we go into properties, and you can see what I've done is I've got a table here that I've created. I've got a column which is a table name, short-term madness. A column which is saved to folder, which is where I want to save the folder. You can tell by the S's that both of these are strings. Strings are effectively just a line of data or multiple lines of data that contains a combination of alphanumeric and numbers. You know, it can be pretty much anything. Alright. So then we start with that, and then the next one down here we'll go to, I'll just have a look at it. You can see here that I've got the source data. So one column called source data where I'm pasting in my table. You can always modify a node by right clicking and going configure. So I could technically create new columns here by creating a name, for example. Put the name in, define the type, and off we go. Not required for this though. But let's just follow the bouncing ball, right? So we go into table name. Then we come over here to string manipulation. And I know that once I'm in Obsidian, right, that the rollable tables don't work when I've got a space. Alright, so if I do that, that breaks the rolling. Alright, it doesn't handle spaces in the name. Now I've got to just quickly reset this. There we go. So it just doesn't handle them well. So what I'm doing is I'm removing the spaces. Alright, if we can come in here, you can see I've used a remove characters, which is effectively like this is a list of all the things this node can do. So I can just click on this and see what it does. I'm bringing in the table names field from the before and saying remove any spaces. So anything between those two little nodes there. So that's pretty simple. Then we split our data out. So there's two things going on here. I need to create a dice roller string. So that would be this string of text up the top that creates the dice roller. So if we have a look at configure, we're basically doing a join of multiple strings and putting them together. And we're bringing in a string that says the start. Oh, don't do that. Now, you can see I'm just typing effectively here between the two brackets of what I want it to write. This is the code that's required to drive this. Then, after that, I need to bring in the table name from my data previously. And alright, if we come back to table name, we can see short-term madness is my table name. By the time it gets to here, it's still table name. That's cool. Alright, and then we have another string adding in more of the text that's required to fulfill that line, and then table name no space. So the first one, if we have a look back here, it's basically the name of the category, the note. The second one was the spaces removed, and what that line is doing is effectively creating that line there. Once I've got that, I create a new row called sort. Alright, and I add a 1 into that sort column. So what this looks like once it's done, alright, is I have all these folders here, but effectively I've created this table output there, and then this sort column there, and I've added that into my line of data. If we go back down here and have a look what's happening down here, you can see we're creating another one here. Again, I'm doing it on the table output column, and you'll understand why I union these all together in a minute, which I'll explain, but I'm effectively joining multiple strings together. So I'm doing that little up arrow and then adding the table name no space, and all I'm doing here is I'm creating this line of data. Alright, and then giving that a sort. I'm setting that to sort 1000. Now, 1000 seems like a big number, but in my mind 1000 is a number that no one's ever going to reach. I can't imagine anyone's going to make a rollable table that has 1000 options or more. At least I've never come across one. So if I put it as 1000 and I sort from 0 to the highest number, this is always going to be the last line. That's my logic there. Alright, then we do the concatenate, yeah, I don't know. In SQL language, I need to union the data. And what the union the data means is effectively I want to stack the data that I've received back on top of each other. And if we have a look here, effectively what that means is if I have a table output and a sort column in this data, and I have a table output and a sort column in this data, I want to stack them on top of each other so that the result looks like this. Alright, and you can see here that the two lines of data that I've created are now stacked on top of each other, and the sort column is stacked on top of each other. That's called unioning. Alright, over here we're doing a column filter. I only need the table output and the sort in order to proceed, so I filter everything else out, and then I union that back in over this way. Alright, let's go a bit further down now. Let's have a look what's happening down here. So this is where the actual data is flowing through. So I've got a cell splitter here, and effectively the source data is coming in here, and I'm filtering or splitting on space. So there's actually a space in here. Alright, and I'm creating two columns from this data. That's what the set array size does. And if we right click and go output table, we can see the result is the source data gets split into two columns on the first space. So that basically finds the space between there, cuts it off, and the space between all of these, cuts it off and creates these as two separate columns. Alright, then I rename the columns just to make it so that it's easy for me to understand this, because source data R1 and 0 isn't very easy to understand, so I changed that. It's always a good idea to make sure your variables are renamed as you move forward. Same thing with columns in a database. So roll this and roll result. So that's the first column, that's the second column. Alright, now I want to manipulate these so that they are in the same format that's required for the table. And you can see here we're now doing a joining of multiple strings again. So join, we're going to join this string. So for anyone who's working with Obsidian a fair bit, you'd start to recognize this is the starting identifier of a table. Then we add the roll this, so the first column in. Then we add another string with the second part of the table, which is the middle identifier. And then we add in the rolled result, and then we added another string. we append that to something called table output. And if we right click and go append a table and have a look, we can see the table output here results in this. So it takes, rolls this and roll result, adds that line in first, after the first column adds that second line, and then after the end adds that last line. And then once we obviously see what that looks like inside of Obsidian, we can see we've got all these lines here. And effectively, like if you've got advanced tables installed, the plugin, you can tab, well, which I don't have installed. Let's go ahead and do that. If you don't have advanced tables, I highly recommend it. Alright, now that it's installed, we can press tab when we're in one of these columns and it will size everything up nicely. It's completely not required, but that's what it's doing, right? It's adding in those lines, and those lines in order to understand that that is a table, which allows us to format it as a table. Alright, it does that to every line. Alright, so it processes every line in the, or every row, sorry, in the table and does that to everything. Alright, then we come here and we're basically filtering out the data we don't need, so I only need the table output moving forward. And here things get a little bit trickier, but basically if we go back to here, what I want to do is I want to bring this line in and then add this line. Alright, before I bring the other lines in and do that. Remember that conversation before about how I was using sort to stack? That's what this is about. So I'm using a row filter here, and what I want to do is include rows by number, and I want the first row and the last row is going to be number 1. So all I want is row number 1. Alright, so I bring row number 1 in, and if we have a look at how this works, we can see that it brings in the top row. Alright, then we add a sort. Sorry. Going to output data, we add a sort of 3. Now if you're starting to play along of what's happening here, you can see I've got 1, there's a space over here, actually we'll have a look at this, 1, 2, the other one I'm making is 3, then there's going to be a 4, and then there's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, so what I'm doing is I've calculated as I've gone through what sort number some of these things need to be. And you can see in here that what I've done is I've created an expression, I'm adding a column called sort, and I'm adding a 3 in here. Alright, down below we've got a row filter again, but this time I'm going first row to number 2. I could just put to the end of the table, I just saw that, instead of putting an actual hard-coded number, so that will work fine. So this now brings in row 2 to the last row. If we go and click on the filtered option, we do have to run this again. We can see here that it's bringing everything except the first row. Let's bring it in nicely. Alright, then we come over here and we're having a look at the math formula, and what I'm doing is I'm indexing all rows here. So this is getting a bit more advanced now. I'm using this row index function, and what this does is this basically goes past every row and assigns a number to it. So what I wanted to do is just have row index, which basically says I want to index my row plus 1, which means I want the first one to be 1, the second one to be 2, the third one to be 3, and ongoing. Alright, so if we have a look at this, we can see 1 through to 10 is generated, so that works nicely. Now, for those of you who are playing along, starting to understand what I'm doing here, I'm using these elements with the sort to stack things in the right order. And if we come over here and have a look at sorted table, you'll see what I mean. So 1 through to 1000, when it's sorted according to lowest to highest, will give me the output in the format that I want it, right? So down here, 1 through to 10 is actually not going to work. Okay, and the reasoning for that is number 1 needs to be the dice roller at the top. Number 2 needs to be an empty line. Number 3 needs to be the header of the table. Number 4 needs to be this table ... or -- whatever it is to create the header. So therefore I need this data down here to start at number 5. Is that even right? Did I do 5 or 4? I think I may have even got a mistake here, but I can fix that up pretty easily. So in here, I've added in my 1 to 10, but that's no good. I need to go higher. So now I need 5 through to 14 here. So I've just identified an error. What we're going to do is going to go right click configure. I'm going to sort +4. Alright, we'll run that again. And if we output that now, we can see that's now added 4 to every sort prep and create a column called sort. So I now have 5 through to 14. Alright. Now we come in here, we're just doing another column filter. So again, filtering just on the data that I need. So I only need the table output and the sort at this stage. Everything else is no longer required, so I filter it out. Here we go, we do another union. Alright, so we can stack this on top of each other. Alright, and you can see here the sort order is not actually in row. It's going according to the first character there, and it's going 1 through to 9, I would say, or 1 through to 0. So that's no good. So what we need to then do is run it through a sorter tool. Alright, we sort ascending, and effectively what that does is then sorts that into the order that I need it. And you can see here that I did have an error there, so I needed to do that as 5 instead of 4. So that's just because I didn't have one of the lines in that I did when I first made the tool. Anyway, that's fixed, so it's now sorting. It's in the order that I needed this to go. Alright, now we come over here. I don't need the sort anymore, so I'm just filtering out the sort. If I included the sort, by the time I get to this next node, the sort will actually be written to my file, and that's no good. Alright, and the final step here is to write to the CSV file. Now, a CSV file, for anyone who's understanding basic file types, is generally just a text file. So a CSV file is generally something these tools support quite easily. But with a CSV file, what I can do is just write into a MD file instead. So the CSV writer node comes with the tool. I just had to do a little bit of configuration to make it work. One of the things I wanted to do though is I wanted to write a dynamic saving name. Right? So instead of me hard coding both the folder that I'm outputting to and the name of the file in here, which I could do, I wanted to bring that in from a variable. So you remember all the way back here where we enter the table name. I then do another output here into a string manipulation. Alright, if we have a look in here, what's going on is I'm doing a join, and I'm joining the save to folder and the table name, and then adding in the string to MD. And what that does is, if we have a look at this, it basically creates this save to path. So you can see I'm saving to my G drive in my Obsidian folder in Demo Vault 2 under random tables, and then I'm calling it shorttermmadness.md. Alright, what that does is then that feeds into this table row to variable node, which is a really handy node, I've noticed. And basically what this does is any data you feed into here creates a variable, and that creates this little red output. And red outputs seem to be pretty handy, because red outputs can be dragged into different parts of nodes, and you'll see the different corners that it's snapping to. Alright, so when you drag it to the top left of a node, that allows you to bring it in as a variable. Now, a variable is just a bucket that contains information, I guess you would say. So if we come in here and we configure this node, alright, you can see over here in the output location, there's this V button over here. I clicked that, and I clicked the use variable, and then I used the save to piece of information. And what that does is that then comes over to here. Alright, it brings the save to variable in, and you can see that one is that contains the full path to where I want to save this file. So this effectively dynamically tells it where to save, and off it goes. Now, there was a few things I needed to do in here, and just in case you guys do this themselves, there was a comma in here, for example, which created a separator in my data, because CSV files are generally separated in some way. I don't need that, so I needed to change that. Quotes, this had this and this in here. I've deleted that because that was wrapping every string in quotes, which was breaking the way it looked. And then here in encoding, it was set to default, and that was changing my dashes to question marks, so I've changed that to UTF-8. Alright, and that's just the save format. And yeah, effectively, when I run this file, it creates my file. So let's just go through the process again, just so you guys can see sort of how quick it actually is to operate. What we'll do is we'll come into here. We'll grab another one of these. Actually, that one's not got the header file, but I'll grab that one there. It's got the header. Alright, we'll come over to KNIME, come over to the table creator, right click, configure, paste from the top cell, click OK. That was a monster query, so we're going to go configure. We're going to go random monster table, I think it's like 4 or something. I've looked at the PDF earlier. Click OK. Click run, that runs. Now we go to demo vault and we can see random monster table 4 now exists. We can go into preview mode, we've got our table, and you can see we've got, well, we had rollable dice. There we go, rollable dice. I'm like rolling the same thing over and over again. So yeah, there we go, guys. That's KNIME, and as you can see, like that's, I don't know, like that's an advanced tool, and I'm not expecting probably 2% of you to even install this tool and have a look. But there's some very cool things that you can do with it. And sort of just to show you where it could go, this is Ultrix. This is a monster converter that I've created, and effectively what I've got this doing is I've created a macro, and that's what this is. And I feed in an entire directory of monsters into this thing, and it basically runs through and creates an Obsidian file for every single one of them, and formats it in a way that you can just open up in Obsidian and it's done. So I did an entire monster book in a minute and a half. Alright, that's pictures were there, tables formatted, encounter strings added, all the tags added. Yes, it took me about 4 days to create the macro, but when I was done, it's now empowered me to run that on that one type of data source that I've found. You know, as long as the data source is the same, I can run it through that macro and just spit out monster manuals in minutes. So just think about like that, right? Like you could do that with this tool here, I'm most certain, because this is effectively the same thing. And you could create workflows for yourself that just will make your life easier. And also, if we're all using this KNIME tool, then we can share workflows with each other. Alright, we can create cool workflows and say, hey, I need to do this cool thing or this really obnoxious data entry task. Here's something I've made to make it easier. And people can just pick it up and hopefully, you know, assuming people document their work pretty well, you know, we can share methods with each other or workflows with each other that's going to make our life easier. So have a think about it. It's not going to be for everyone, that's absolutely for sure. But I'd like to think that this is easy enough for almost everyone to use as just a user of the data. And then there'll be those of you who probably step outside that box and go, you know what, I can do this. This is really cool. Let's see what I can make. So I'll be really interested to see where that sort of happens. But anyway, guys, that's a advanced data entry method for you guys. So hopefully that's just been interesting for you. If you are enjoying these videos, please do like and subscribe. Huge thanks to all of my patrons. Really interesting projects that we're starting to handle. For anyone who hasn't looked into my Patreon, we are now starting to get into some Patreon-only content. So there's some projects happening in the back end of that Patreon. If you guys want to pop by and have a look, I'm sure there'll be some interesting stuff there for you guys to sort of dive into. Just basically sharing tips and ideas and example data on how to really get the best out of Obsidian, and hopefully people are finding that useful. So yeah, anyway guys, outside of that, enjoy your night, and I will speak to you on the forums.